Welcome to Voices of the Community, which explores critical issues facing Northern California communities. We introduce you to the voices of community thought leaders and change makers who are working on solutions that face our fellow individual community members, neighborhoods, cities, and our region. This is George Koster, your host. This episode is part of our series exploring COVID-19's impact on nonprofits and small businesses in the San Francisco Bay Area. Back in April of 2020, when we decided to create this ongoing series on COVID-19's impact, first on nonprofits and then on small businesses in the San Francisco Bay Area, we, like you, had no idea how long the pandemic would go on and what the health and economic impact would be on our community. As we enter our second year of the global COVID-19 pandemic, with record numbers of both cases and deaths, our schools, businesses, and governments are still struggling to deal with the health, economic, mental, and societal impacts of the latest Omicron variant. This all adds to the ongoing uncertainty of our ever-changing indoor and outdoor, vaccinated and unvaccinated protocols, and the politics of the pandemic that will drive how we all come back together as a unified or fractured community. We will continue to shine a spotlight on the nonprofits and small businesses that make up the fabric of our community, along with the founders and staff who are struggling to deal with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on their operations, services, and sustainability until we can all get to the other side of the pandemic. Along the way, we will also share with you all the amazing solutions that our nonprofits, small businesses, foundations, and government leaders are working on to help us all get to the other side of the pandemic and come together to rebuild our communities with more economic, social, and environmental equality.
At this point, what I feel like is that we've really made a mark as an arts ensemble by demonstrating and living the fact that the creativity that goes into this sort of art making, particularly community engaged arts practice, is essential to social change. It's not just part of it. It's essential. And we are part of the movement that is the Tenderloin. And that means a great deal to me. I think people see us as we are at the table and we are creating new tables. And that's meant a lot.
This episode features the voices of the founder of ABD Productions and the Sky Watchers program, and Blutenthal, along with the members of the Sky Watcher Ensemble, Shavonne Allen and Joelle Yates. I'm joined remotely by Anne, Shavonne, and Joelle to share about the Sky Watchers Ensemble's work to create art within the Tenderloin community in San Francisco. Welcome to Voices of the Community, Joelle, Shavonne, and Anne.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So let's start by sharing with the audience a little bit of each of your background, and I'm going to start with you, Anne.
Thank you so much, George. Well, as you said, my name is Anne Blutenthal. I am the founder of Sky Watchers. My background is really in dance and choreography, and I started an arts nonprofit that is now moving towards its 40th year. It began as a dance company for 30 of those years, and I became, after a few decades, interested in making work that wasn't just about the things that enraged me, but working directly with folks whose lives were most directly affected by those issues that enraged me. And that interest landed me here in the Tenderloin, where together we discovered that relationship and dialogue was a great foundation for art and social change, and hence the Sky Watchers program, of which I am deeply blessed to be part for the last 11 plus years.
Thank you. And Shavonne, please share with the audience a little bit of your background.
Hi, I'm Shavonne Salona Allen, paying homage to my ancestors. My father was born in sharecropping Arkansas during, apartheid, Jim Crow. And they came out to San Francisco during World War II, where he was a conscientious objector. And he moved to the Fillmore eventually, where my father met and married my mother. And I was born in the Fillmore at Mount Zion Hospital. I was a love child. So that was one of the first times, as before my memory, I was displaced. I was one of the families displaced during the urban renewal. And I grew up in the Bernal Heights and Mission districts of San Francisco, where I went to Catholic school. And I debuted at some talent shows there, dancing and mostly dancing. And I graduated from Lowell High School, and I went to put myself through first person in my family to graduate from college at Cal State Hayward. I went on to work in the San Francisco School District as a substitute teacher and a a paraprofessional in special education. And I also went through a very tragic incident where I met and married my son's father. I was part of a interracial relationship. He was Chinese American and I'm African American. It was a tumultuous relationship, but I had my son in 2000 where I suffered from some nerve damage and I was partially paralyzed. I was prescribed Vicodin, and that was the beginning of a long battle of addiction. I am in recovery now, and very proudly since 2018, October the 16th, and which is just amazing. I came to return to San Francisco in 2019 for housing in the Tenderloin area. I was housed in a single room occupancy, and that's how I came across Sky Watchers, where I've been for 3 years now, 2 years as an ensemble member and 1 year as an artistic facilitator.
Thank you, Shavonne. I really appreciate your sharing your story. And Joel, could you share with the audience a little bit of your background as well?
Sure. Afternoon. I'm the fourth of 5 generations of African Americans in San Francisco. I'm proud to say I'm responsible for the 5th generation. Raised here most of my life. Spent time in and out of San Francisco. I had exposure and involvement in the arts, visual arts, photography, singing, dancing, a lot in theater. And during that time, I've always written. These were practices mostly in a hobby and just for enjoyment. But just through different professions and just over time, I increased in skills and just adapted to myself, my art, as I move forward. I've been a resident of the Tenderloin for about a decade now. And during the first half of my time, I dealt with addiction issues and health issues that led to a requirement of major lifestyle changes. Part of the change was changing everything, changing the people I decided to have around me and influence in my life. And moved to a stage where in that change required to fill in where I had removed pieces. And that's where I was introduced to Sky Watchers. There happened to be a poster in the elevator in my building right at the time I decided to venture out for what I was looking for. And it was actually going to be in my building the following week or two. And so I walked into a room one Wednesday afternoon. They just happened to be having a writing exercise, something I was already in practice of doing. So it was a good introduction to the group and something that had me feel at ease. And I stayed and got involved in the art, which I didn't know I'd be doing as a profession. And as a work, I feel called to as far as building in the community. I never saw the two being put together, despite my background in San Francisco, at least for myself. And over time, was invited on to be part of the staff and continue to work.
Thank you. And staying with you, Joel, would you like to share with the audience some more background on Sky Watchers Ensemble itself, its work within the Tenderloin? So, for example, you guys, it sounds like you incubated through the Tenderloin National Forest. So share with the audience some background of what the Sky Watchers Ensemble is doing inside of the Tenderloin.
Yes, so we're actually in the 11th year of Sky Watchers. And I often tell people, without really noticing it, I was on the borders of Sky Watchers, kind of an unofficial member. It wasn't realized until our documentary, until I see a figure in the background at this event and this and there, that I've been connected with them without really realizing it. Our founder actually met a couple of residents of a SRO right next door to the Tenderloin Forest. And that's actually where Sky Watchers began, with a conversation and just people coming together talking. And at the time was doing public art, bringing dance to the streets to build connection with people and just have a greater engagement with the community and just bring more life to the art, more purpose to it. The ladies that she actually spoke with in conversation are people I was acquainted with. We actually found out years later and was actually acquainted with my daughter, who was a 1-year-old resident right next door to the Tenderloin Forest. Sky Watchers went through a lot of changes, from community gatherings or open mics and drum circles to cell groups of branches of different artists throughout the Bay Area, opening up either like visual arts groups, discussion groups, anything according to their medium of art that they chose and how they just wanted to engage with people. I was in one of these groups in one of the buildings within the Tenderloin, not knowing that these two people were a part of something bigger. I actually had a conversation with them one time telling them about this event I was going to go to. It was actually a circumstance common that I'd actually be sober at the time and not really doing anything that was harming myself. And just we'll walk by and hear some music and see people I knew in the neighborhood through other realms of association coming together on something different, something I had roots in, and something I was being awakened. I just remember as a safe space and something of remembrance. That was, I guess, kind of a mid-transition for Sky Watchers. And during my time away from these groups, Sky Watchers was actually molding into, I guess you say, into a core group or a continuous kind of core unit that were drawn into each other. And they started gathering these conversations and these stories and started creating a production for a yearly festival, which it still goes on to this day, our May Festival. And again, one of these festivals actually occurred in my building, and I didn't even realize who it was. I was just coming into the festival on the food and the breaking bread patterned after the title of the piece, which is At the Table. And that's why I knew the groups to be in the gathering safe spaces, people breaking bread, people sharing their lives, people sharing their stories. And when I guess you say stepped in for the last day or the last time I stepped away, I started actually hearing the conversations and getting a chance to look at these people. And I guess you say being reintroduced to the issues that I've been involved with and lived amongst and experienced and seeing constantly within this neighborhood, and just seeing how pushing the art forward and just how if I continue up this tree, I can actually be part of the change that I want to increase my utility with.
Thank you. And staying with just the kind of form, if you will, of Sky Watchers Ensemble, it's a combination of community members, Tenderloin community members, as well as professional artists that are working together to mount the productions.
Yes. Actually, it's just like you said. I always like to say it's a group of artists. You know, artists are made and then professions or careers are built. And the thing is, you have members in and out who actually have seasons and lives of the Tenderloin and moved out to the Tenderloin and coming back to the Tenderloin. But yeah, so everyone has different levels of exposure. We have dancers, we have producers, we have singers, we have writers, we have puppet masters, we have voice masters, we have mixologists. And so, yeah.
And we have people who have an artful way of living, and that's what they bring.
And going to you, Anne, could you share with the audience a little bit about the mission of Sky Watchers and the 4-part value-based mythology that you all have created?
Oh, it's a mythology and a methodology. Absolutely. That was so beautiful, Joel. Thank you.
Right.
And I can't help but sort of go back to Joel's introduction to his background and kind of enjoying the memory of that first day because it was so memorable when we went around what was then a pretty large circle at that point, and everyone read what they had done a free write on, and he had a 2-liner, I think, and everybody just sort of dropped their jaws and was like, who is this new person who's bringing some kind of light of brilliance to the circle? So I just had to give him that prop. It was such a beautiful moment. And again, overlapping with how Joel described this so beautifully, the evolution of Sky Watchers. In the beginning, really I was leaving what I thought was the art world. It was certainly living the art world I had been part of in the sort of high production dance world, to see what it would be like to make work that was more of, by, and for the people rather than just about the stuff. So it was just me having conversations and quite anonymously trying to see how I could transform choreography, my years of choreography, into some other kind of art form. And what just emerged. I had basic principle was listen, wait, build relationships of trust, stay curious, stay humble, and see what happens. And what happened was I began to care more about the relationships as the art form than I did about producing any kind of art that I had previously known as art. And so conversation became art, gesture fell out of conversation, poetry fell out of conversation. We would keep bringing it back to the issues that were most burning for people, because if you sit in conversation with people long enough, the themes start to emerge. People are generally ruminating around the same ideas or the same frustrations or the same harms or traumas or joys or celebrations. And so work would just sort of naturally coalesce around ideas, and then we would develop them. So what happened was, after a couple of years, after 3 years, I think, when I was at that point teaching in an academic setting, and some students were interested in working with me in what was then Sky Watchers. And I said, sure, just come along. And they were like, well, you need to teach us your methodology. And I said, I don't have a methodology. And they were like, oh, yes, you do. And I was like, oh, no, I really just sit and listen and eat pizza, bring pizza. And they helped me to name what was going on. So that's all a preamble to, over the years, I then kept trying to articulate this thing that for me felt like just a natural process of building relationships across many axes of difference. And the first tenet was relational. So we call it relational, durational, conversational, and structural. So the first one I've talked about, we believe that relationship is the first site of social change. And that is our art also. The relationships are the art, and they are also real. And they happen over time. So durational, we don't just show up to do a piece of work and leave. We show up every week all around the year. And that's how the trust builds. And conversational is, like we've said, that the work, again, the art is the conversation, and the art emerges from the conversation. So that's the feeding ground. It's also the circle we create that is built on love and care for each other. What happens then, so that was relational, durational, and conversational. What started to happen is that individual stories emerged, and they really begged for context, because no story sits in isolation, even though a lot of people feel isolated or feel that their story is unique or feel individually harmed. Those stories are connected to the structures of our society. So it felt very important that we started to connect individual stories to the larger picture, the larger historical, cultural, political context. And further, to then take what art emerges from those stories and to place it in the civic discourse so that it sits in solidarity with people who are organizing or making change, so that that work can both open the hearts of people in a different way and also help affect change. So that's the whole methodology of relational, durational, conversational, and structural, all situated on the ground of care and love.
Thank you. That was good. A nice overview and structure. So, Shavonne, turning to you, could you share with the audience, from your perspective, what you feel Sky Watchers Ensemble's impact's been on the Tenderloin and, of course, yourself as well?
Yes. What Anne says, is so skillfully done, because when I walked into the group, it had been going on for, I think, 10 years or 8 years at that time. And I had just moved into the Tenderloin and fresh in recovery from a close to 15-year heroin and methamphetamine addiction, and many other things, many other traumas that I hadn't yet examined. And when I came to the Tenderloin because it was affordable. I had found affordable housing there. It's one of the last affordable places in San Francisco. And I was working. I got in a job working as an in-home care worker, as in the SROs, the single room occupancies. So all of this was very new to me. I didn't know anyone. Even though I was from San Francisco, I didn't have really connections with my family or any of the friends. So I'm in this environment, new in recovery, and there's a lot of open air drug dealing and using going on. And then I was invited to one of the workshops. The artists would come to the Sky Watcher artists would come and do workshops. And I thought, this was cool. It was fun. We talked and we hung out, and I got to know some of my neighbors. And I was eventually invited to one of the rehearsals that happens regularly out on another site. And when I saw the group, I said, this looks pretty cool. It was like a very eclectic group of people. I was like, this is San Francisco. It felt very good. And when I sat down and I was instantly welcomed, I get a little bit emotional, because we talk about these things, but I remember the feeling of the loneliness. And I think I remember one of the first things I said is something about belonging or being a part of. That's huge, because that's what a lot of people who suffer long-term addiction, they feel very marginalized and isolated. And so the impact for me was, first of all, finding a connection and friendship, and learning how to write about the valleys the trials and tribulations in my life as a practice, and then not knowing how these writings would be used, eventually be included in parts of these beautiful performance pieces and in the community. When we're invited, we do a lot of collaborations with other organizations in the community. So when Sky Watchers comes, when we're invited oftentimes for the energy and the joy, but the storytelling that we learn how to do, that I've learned how to do, the truth telling. The first time I ever talked about some of the traumas that I've experienced with addiction or learning what it feels like to be a Black woman in white space. I did this. These things came out during my writings, and I learned how to share them, to just perform them as my life story, and to find out other people in the community, other women were going through the same things. I had no idea. And over time, I learned how my story and my life experience was connected to a larger picture. My understanding of the fact that I come from a red-lined area in San Francisco and the Fillmore that was decimated during the urban renewal and the impact on community, and the projects that and the documentaries that I've been a part of have informed me. And as I'm informed, I share it with other people and talk about those things. And we grieve together, we celebrate together, and we laugh together. And one of the biggest things that we do is we learn how to play and experiment together. That's a big part of our healing. That's been a big part of my healing. And one of the things that was really impactful for me, because when you come in as a new person, you don't see people, you don't see the transformation that's happened. Or I went through my own transformation, meaning growing and learning how to share and perform in front of people and show up in the community and learning who the people of the Tenderloin are. I have lived in this SRO building where there's a lot of people who've worked all their lives, retired on fixed incomes, and a lot of addiction going on. And I didn't really know any of my neighbors. I used to see this one guy walking around with a sketch pad and drawing and doing videos. And I was a little bit frightened of him, actually. So I wasn't sure what kind of, mental, what was going on with him. But I invited him. I knew his creative energy would be welcomed in our Sky Watcher space. And over time, I found out that he lived really right directly across from my room. And I'd lived there for 3 years and we never knew that. And he started coming to Sky Watchers, and it was amazing. He was battling a very serious addiction, but he would show up every Wednesday. He would be there every single Wednesday. And he had so many talents that to see someone, their brilliance, see someone come to life again and have their creativity revealed, because people lose themselves. And he does puppets, he does videos, he's had an art show, and that's connected him with his family. And for me to witness that, he's got these gifts from Sky Watchers, and his family reached out to me and invited me to Thanksgiving. And he's white, Petaluma, grew up in a very different environment. And that's what Sky Watchers does. It connects people who would probably pass each other through life and allows a space where we can get to know and see the individual, the human being, their spirit.
Thank you for sharing that. Joelle, would you like to share with the audience a little bit of your take on the impact of Sky Watchers on the community and yourself?
Yeah, Sky Watchers really encouraged me to really dig into my writing. I always found it easy to put the pen to the page and just my hand go. But really start just looking at my voice and my intention. And one of the people I met here, she actually was raised in the same neighborhood I was in San Francisco, about two to three generations before me. And she constantly goes through a season where she tells me, you need to go ahead and write a book. And she's told me enough times that I can't let it go. And so it nags me at times. And I'm like, I guess really believing it. She kind of just really believe the possibility. It's like the only thing that makes it not be here is me finishing the last page. Like Shavonne said, it's really witnessing transformation in people's lives, not just witnessing, but just, I was actually, as soon as it started, I was thinking about one particular person when I first started. And I used to refer to her as a lady with the dog. She was always asleep. I didn't know if it was narcotic related or life situation, but it was randomly one time, I say maybe after a year or two, she sent me a Facebook friend request. And I noticed that there was like maybe 2 other Sky Watchers that were friends with hers. I don't think they're still part of the group. I think one person was people I first met and she didn't come around. But she went from the lady with the dog to the lady. I don't join none of the shows. I don't do the shows. She just hang around. And I think the last time I heard that, 5 months passed and she's in the practices and she's joining the first festival after maybe like 4 or 5 years. And come to find out that she's a very knowledgeable and intelligent lady with a big heart. And I think that goes to the durational. It would go months and seasons when I see her. Or if I did, it was like just standing on the sideline or against the wall. a chair pulled to the side and quiet. So now, only because of your question that I remember that's who she was and what was going on before, because it's almost like seeing a totally new person. Everyone in the world deals with mental health at one level or another, or one season or another. And I know one of her big battles, and the hardest time, she always knows where there's someone there's going to be on a Wednesday at 2:00. And the question is not what day or what time is it, because that connection that's been made. I won't go into detail, but I see just in choosing to claim their frailty and to stand forward within the performance, taking the knee and claiming to herself that she'll overcome. And that's a lot of the stories that you'll hear about this neighborhood and about the move that we make with this art.
Thank you. And Anne, turning to you, you helped create the organization over the decade plus that you've been working on it. What do you feel has been some of the impacts that Sky Watchers as the whole ensemble has had on the Tenderloin and actually the greater San Francisco community?
I think it's impossible to talk about impact of one's work because who am I to say about impact on other people? I think that Joelle and Shavonne have been amply eloquent about it, and I feel mostly the impact on me and in ways that I haven't really articulated before. So I don't know if I should do it on a radio interview first, but let's just say I really did not know when I anonymously sat myself down in the Senator Hotel that I would be here 12 years later. I fell in love. I lost my heart. I found my calling. I found meaning beyond my wildest dreams and more love in the, 40 square blocks, whatever, than in any other neighborhood I've lived in my life. So I don't know. The grantors are always saying, tell us what kind of social change your art has made. And I won't answer it because it's not for me to answer, but I will let other people speak to it. And I will say that one of the things on a less emotional level that feels important is that we are making art. I mean, these are like all the stuff we've said is true and is really the most important thing. And there is a footprint along the way. And the footprints are also these works of art. And they're all kinds of they're from wheat pasted posters to bus kiosks, full-size, life-size portraits to the annual productions to 3 documentary films. From whatever mechanism we can figure to create the art, there's a lot of art. And I think one of the impacts that I felt was important was that in the beginning, when I would sit in on lots of organizational meetings or committee meetings or, coalition meetings to learn more about the TL and what was going on and to try to make the work relevant and to also, because it was part of my creative research, to just learn. I think people saw a middle-aged white lady, like she's an artist, what the heck is she doing here? But she didn't go away. And I think they saw the art we were doing as cute or something or decorative for maybe a number of years, maybe a lot of years actually. But at this point, what I feel like is that we've really made a mark as an arts ensemble by demonstrating and living the fact that the creativity that goes into this sort of art making, particularly community engaged arts practice, is essential to social change. It's not just part of it. It's essential. And we are part of the movement that is the Tenderloin. And that means a great deal to me. I think people see us as we are at the table and we are creating new tables. And that's meant a lot.
Thank you. And I think what I'm going to do is ask each of you to just share examples of projects that the Sky Watchers Ensemble is working on. And so I'm going to start with you, Joelle. Can you share a little bit about the ongoing workshops?
So our Wednesday meetings, like I said, that's a constant. It's been a constant for many years beyond me and hopefully continuously. So going forward, we refer to it as the circle. That's how we come and that's how we sit down. It's a safe space of confidentiality and agreement. The agreement just allows the love to continue and it's a space for healing, space for learning, space for conversation, space for laugh, space for fun. Like Shavonne said, it's our playtime. From that playtime, we learn. We learn about new subjects. We may learn about new connections as far as the subjects and connection to ourselves. Like Anne mentioned, in the greater scheme of things and how it's all connected. It's in the circle. Some people are directors, some people are writers, some people are speakers, some people like to play. And then so there may be a word and somebody wants to play with that word. And then that play gets continued and remixed for 5 or 6 weeks. And at the time that someone needed recording or written down that word, and months down the road, that word becomes a whole showpiece. And then 2 seconds from that piece that was created from that word becomes something that we laugh about for years. But it holds the story of the chain and how that came about. And that them 2 words, evolution, they hold a sweet memory for a member that's no longer with us. People that moved away from the group. Like I said, it's the conversation. You always remember pieces, and the conversation never changes. We build understanding, we build knowledge, and we build art in those circles.
Thank you. I love the metaphor of the circle. And Shavonne, turning to you, could you share with the audience a little bit about the Memorials Project?
The yearly memorial project remembers the lives who have perished on the streets of San Francisco. And it's a project where there are many moving parts. We have many people involved from the community who we have these banners, and each person's name, the letters are cut out and are placed on this banner. And it's artfully done and skillfully done and carefully done. And we actually invite members from multi-faith organizations and churches. So it's a multi-faith event. And my particular experience of it is we have these banners, and we do a procession through the neighborhood. And it's very emotional because people who are actually sitting on the streets can see that we are recognizing, acknowledging the deaths that have occurred. And I believe last year there was close to 700 lives who were lost on the streets. That's not including the lives that were lost in the SROs, just specifically.
I just have to correct a little bit. I think for the record, it's important to say that there has been for many decades an annual vigil for all the people whose lives were lost on the streets of San Francisco. And that was established by a coalition of people, including the Interfaith Council and a number of other Tenderloin or organizational representatives. And when we, it's like 5 or 6 years ago, some of us from Sky Watchers went to one of those vigils and were very moved and felt like we needed a visual representation. We need to make that more visible. And that's something that we as artists can do. And we came up with this idea that Shavonne is telling you about, which is the banner, so that we could have a banner hand sewn and hand pasted by each individual's name, carried by another individual, and line the steps of City Hall with those banners to represent the lives lost from what we consider to be crime against humanity, which is this level of poverty. And it does include people from SROs, actually, who passed away in SROs. And that number has tragically doubled in the 5 years that we've been doing that annual event. So I just want to make sure that no one was going to feel slighted. We didn't start the event, but it was something we were fortunate to connect to.
No, I appreciate it. Every time I sit on a panel and I listen to Joelle, Ann, or other members, I learn so much more about, because we do so many different things. I was just reflecting on the fact that many of the things that I'm involved in today, I started with the relationships that I built in Sky Watchers. One thing that we do, we sit on a lot of community meetings, and we get information, and that information is brought back to our circle, as Joelle was saying, about different jobs, opportunities to do outreach. And one of the workshops I am involved in now is with Larkin Street. I do a weekly workshop there. And one of the members, I organize an event, a street fair that Sky Watchers is a part of, that they perform in. And everything is about coming from the community, and it's put together and organized by the Tenderloin residents. We all come from the Tenderloin area, and we come up with solutions to things that we want to address that are pressing. For example, we worked on a very successful campaign during the pandemic. A lot of the buses were stopped. We collaborated with other organizations to get the buses running back to our community. And we worked on a lot of different campaigns.
Stop the sweep.
Stop the sweeps, yes.
Starting right now was a campaign to get the rents for fixed income people in these SROs to drop from 45 and 65% of their income to 30% across the board.
You're listening to Voices of the Community, which explores critical issues facing Northern California communities. Voices of the Community is supported by a grant from the James Irvine Foundation, dedicated to a California where all low-income workers have the power to advance economically. More at irvine.org. This is George Coster, your host, and if you're just joining us, this is our 1-hour special show featuring the voices of the founder of ABD Productions and the Sky Watchers program, Anne Blutenthal, along with members of the Sky Watcher Ensemble, Shavonne Allen and Joelle Yates. Let's get back to our conversation about their community engagement to create performing arts and bring voice to community members in the Tenderloin neighborhood of San Francisco.
Yeah.
Which the 30% is based on, for audience members who've heard me say this a little bit about housing in the past, the 30% is based on HUD's equation of what one should spend on housing is 30% of their annual income. And there's other projects, the Opulence Portrait Series. I don't know, Joelle, if you'd like to talk about that, and Anne at the Table, and then, of course, screenings of films.
Yeah, I'd say Opulence Portraits. The whole thing is a series that's grown. I was first introduced to it just as being a resident of the Tenderloin and seeing neighbors of mine faces up and seeing different props. And I formally joined Sky Watchers and started to understand it. It was a portrayal, a vision project. And it asked members to visualize their most opulent self. I actually was part of the project. And I think one, because opulent, I went and looked up opulence just to know what the actual dictionary says about it. And I think it was maybe up until like the last week before it started that I just really took it in depth. And I was like, well, if I want to vision myself forward, I asked myself what I wanted at the time. And at that time, I was dealing with a chronic illness, and what I wanted was life. And I was like, well, what does that life require? And I wanted to be accepting life and being opulent. You know, part of personal greatness comes accepting oneself and just maximizing yourself. And one of the things I appreciated about myself was writing, and where I was at it, dealing with grief and witnessing things in the community. Opulent Future incorporated all those things, and I chose the Eternal Elegies. And so they went from wheat pasting to we went to portraits, and through a grant, we was able to collaborate and have our pictures posted on the bus stops up and down Market Street. Each individual in a project had 4 posters posted. And as far as the neighborhood, for months, during and after, anytime I saw someone, even someone I may have never spoke to in the whole 10 years I've been in the neighborhood, there was this type of celebration. You know, it wasn't just our vision, but it accentuated people's personal vision, because if they could see me up there, they could see themselves up there. Many people would question about Sky Watchers, if not to participate, just to appreciate that Sky Watchers existed and that avenue was there. From those characters created is where we grew our last show, Towards Opulence. And opulence is always about it growing and increasing. And we went from outdoor performance to doing something never been done, performing a moving show in the library, using multiple floors and multiple sounds and multiple props and multiple artists. And even our assistant supervisor was a part of the show. And it was a multi-partnering of different organizations and artists and techs and crew. It was something that was loved by many people. And they say the Opulence Project is still growing. Our next show will be Towards Opulence, the opera, which we're currently researching right now.
Thank you.
Can I just say a little something about that? Do you mind if I interject?
Sure.
I was just going to say something that has meant a lot to me along the lines of impact, I guess, is when the Opulence Project, which, as Joelle said, started many years ago and taking on increasingly different forms, or growing into different forms, was about how do we all envision ourselves, our most grand, most delighted, most grandiose, if we want, but on our terms, grandiose, not in terms of the archaic meaning of the word. And I think one of my favorite impact statements was from Del Seymour, who when he looked at our tour, he said hundreds of filmmakers have come in and out of the Tenderloin, and they leave with images of crack pipes and needles and people on the streets, of which there are plenty of images to be got. But he said the thing they never leave with is this, what our work is represented, which is the beauty, the joy, the brilliance, the wisdom, the power, the eloquence, the talent, the sense of possibility. And at its core, opulence is about, if you can imagine it, you've already begun to live into it. And that is one of the greatest acts of resistance we offer.
Thank you. And then go ahead, Shavonne. Do you want to share about a project?
Well, I just wanted to add one more thing to include, I'll say, the Opulence Project. For, the way I experienced it, it was a journey. When you're homeless or when you've experienced addiction and lost yourself, even when you come out of it, you wear this jacket for the way you see yourself. And as I've been working with Sky Watchers and doing things in the community, there was a transformation that was happening. And being part of this Opulence Project helped me to name it. So that's where the goddess of empathy comes from. Where she walks, she brings sunshine and healing. And I've watched other people with their journey and self-discovery and embody their gods and be their gods. It's not just like coming up with a superhero from a comic book. It's really magnifying, illuminating the greatness that we already have within us. And it's just such a magnificent project to be a part of. And when people saw our images, the Sky Watchers images, these beautiful representations of our gods, and then they saw us walking in the community, they just lit up, seeing the real, as I believe, the real heroes, and I have so much love for the Tenderloin Beat. People are like, we're talking about the same place. And when I tell them, because I walk through with a different perspective, I meet different people, I see it differently, and I just have a love for all the talent and the personalities and the people who live and work their passion.
Right.
I get to see that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Anne, would you like to share about the 10th anniversary documentary?
Yeah, or if you want me to do I can, because I know there was a long list. I can bang off a few of those.
Sure. Well, there's yep. So there's At the Table and the documentary. So if you want to hit both those, that would be great.
Yeah, I think my name is next. Well, there's Inside Hotel Iroquois and At the Table and the documentary I can talk about. At the Table was the large, 2 or 3 year project that was sort of our hearkening back to something that I talked about earlier, which is trying to position our work in the civic discourse. That was the main thrust of those 3 years. Like, how do we get a seat at the table as an art making and social justice group? And so At the Table had all kinds of manifestations, from the feast that Joel walked into that he referenced in his background, that didn't realize it was Sky Watchers, but that was a big 200-person community feast, to our formal performances, to a music video by Larkin Street Youth. But one of the things that happened in conjunction with At the Table was Inside Hotel Iroquois, which is now a documentary, but was originally a performance work that was some kind of combination of a home makeover idea crossed with the sort of tours of some of the great mansions of the city where people go and get the mansion tours, to bringing that to the Tenderloin and into an SRO, into supportive housing, became a walking meditation where we brought small group of no more than 10 people at a time into one of the supportive housing buildings after working for the better part of a year with the residents of that hotel, to basically invite people into their home to tell their stories or to share their art. But the idea was that there was a lot of money coming down the pike, still coming down the pike, to create more permanent supportive housing, but that the building of it, the supervising of it, the improving or not improving of it, the services that are provided, none of that is done with the input of the consumers of that housing, the residents of that housing, the tenants of that housing. And so this was to bring those voices out, to say, this is what it's like to live here. And this is who we are. We're human beings, and we have shoe collections and poetry collections and dances and, all that. One of the riskiest things that we did, and also it has had a lasting effect. It still has a shelf life as a documentary now.
So where can folks see the documentary and Inside Hotel Iroquois? Where would I go?
You could contact us at info@abdproductions.org, and we can send a link. We have a trailer and we have the full length. We are trying to do it as screening, so whenever possible, if we can have that work create the largest impact possible, we'd love to do that, but it is accessible if someone reaches out.
Great. And we'll include the trailer on the episode web landing page as well, along with the trailer for the document for your 10th anniversary. So tell us about the 10th anniversary documentary.
The 10th anniversary documentary is exactly just that. It's like it highlights 10 years of Sky Watchers. We're super proud of it. It kind of moves us, kind of like you. We just have been plugging along doing our thing all these years. But when we look at it, it gives us a sense of all of the different generations of Sky Watchers, the different manifestations, the hundreds and hundreds of people who have walked through, been part of, witnessed, helped create, helped support, all of that. And so, yeah, we're really excited about that, about spreading the audience for that documentary. And we have another documentary that was called Reimagining the City as Our Own Towards an Architecture of Inclusion, which is a documentary about unpleasant or hostile design, where we do use art to sort of mitigate a form of design and policing through architecture of public space to make it hostile to poor people or unhoused people. So we're excited about that one too. We can give you a link to that trailer as well.
And it sounds like, and that if folks wanted to host a screening at their house or a meetup room, they could work with Sky Watchers Ensemble, a team to actually put that together.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
And with the screening could conceivably include yourself or Shavonne or Joelle or someone else to talk and provide context about the documentaries as well.
Yes.
I think that sounds great. That would be really...
That's what we do.
It's great. All right. So I'm going to move to our next topic, which is, so for folks who've been listening to the series, just about how COVID-19 has impacted nonprofit organizations such as Sky Watchers. How has COVID-19 impacted Sky Watchers from your perspective, Joelle?
I was wondering how I was going to go about it. It started with, I used to say, a new member who I built a connection with. First was scared to give me a hug before I really realized what was going on in the country. That was the first sign of what it was doing. It shut down facilities. Access to certain financial resources were cut off. Like I said, places where basically the arts was really just brought to a standstill. It became, I guess, semi-illegal for us to even to meet. We actually were approached different times. So, well, we couldn't convene because of regulations. COVID actually placed a risk for me. My health at the time was dealing with serious illness. And so I actually was isolated. The same day they started sending kids home. The connection that Skywatcher works to build, that was something we had to work to overcome. A number of these buildings, like I said, people aren't fixed incomes. People don't have the resource to get Wi-Fi. People don't have tablets. A lot of these buildings are old historical buildings, and so it's hard to get a phone signal. So as far as just staying connected, that was a challenge for a lot of people. And through our efforts in partnering with organizations, we was able to bridge the tech divide so that people could actually know that there's still people out there that still get connected and not be trapped in the things that we want to distract them, and just help people move away from being trapped in their own head inside of four walls, just listening to a lot of misery that happens in SROs that people are not unaware of.
What do you feel are some of the good things that have come out of the COVID-19 to support Skywatcher's program, but also the folks in the Tenderloin as well?
Yes, it's kind of a trip because you asked that. My mind instantly goes to the Tenderloin because our stories and situations are rooted in where we presently are. And so I think just in terms of the neighborhood, COVID just brought attention to everything that was already going on here as far as limited resource, everything that was going on, and then how much more it was needed because you couldn't walk down the sidewalk without bumping shoulders with somebody. It was the deficits because they're of lower castes and economic situations as far as no water, no public facilities. It was a tragedy and a disaster across the world. But there was a gap where, as human nature, people weren't thinking beyond themselves and beyond their household. But that person that knew they could walk 5 blocks and go to a mall to use a restroom or use a sink to wash themselves no longer had that option. I said fresh water, safety from the elements. There's no people that didn't have phones, maybe having trouble calling in prescriptions, people that don't have watches, knowing what time the pharmacy is going to close. They're not allowed to access in the buildings where they have clocks just to go about what normalcy of life they're trying to hold on to. It just brought a more serious eye to that in an ever-evolving drug epidemic that we deal with, that's been dealing with in the city and in Tenderloin for generations and generations. COVID helped bring some more attention to that.
Thank you. And Shavonne, from your perspective, how did COVID impact you and the Tenderloin community?
Well, for me, living in an SRO, and I remember when all of the people in my building, we started watching the news, and we were aware of like all of I guess they had closed down a lot of the shelters. And so we were seeing a lot of the tents lining the streets. And that's when I sort of recognized that Sky Watchers was really special. There was all these mandates and ordinances. We had to, I guess, distance ourselves, and that these things were really not possible. But I think there was a shortage of PPEs, masks, and the Sky Watchers, one of the members, Deirdre, she made, we were all concerned because in the building, there's people who are elderly, like Joelle said, health conditions. And we were all scared. We didn't know what it was. And we knew one thing, that we were going to be the last to be, we were ignored. We were not being addressed. The rest of the city were being taken care of. But Sky Watchers, Deirdre, we turned it into this artful thing. She made these beautiful masks. And like Joelle also shared that, since we were not able to meet in person, a lot of our members didn't have laptops. And I was one of them. I didn't have a good, stable laptop. And the members got together and got resources, and we all made sure everyone had a laptop. We had our masks. And we also did a public campaign. I remember we did public health posters. We made all these posters. And I remember it was a group effort. One of the sayings was, we could stay up late, try not to ruminate on Trump because he's a chump. You could stay up late, even eat chocolate cake, but try not to ruminate on Trump.
Actually.
No, that was a great rap.
Never been called a rapper before, but yeah, I'll take that. But those are the things that we worked on together. We were, like Joelle was saying, it was a scary time. These rooms could feel like coffins, and there was a lot of death. People died during that time of overdoses, but I believe a lot of my neighbors died of broken hearts. And a project that I worked on, I was inspired by being part of the documentaries that Anne and Joelle talked about. So I started just recording some of my neighbors' experiences of what it was like, because there was no one else coming in to do it. And a lot of these people have passed away since. But it's definitely a moment in time that we all grieved and shared together.
And do you feel like anything positive has come out of COVID-19 to help shine more of a spotlight, more resources on Sky Watchers as well as the Tenderloin?
Well, I could say that I did a lot of bike riding with Joelle. During that time, got to see a lot of the city I didn't see. I think during that time, a lot of people, the rest of San Francisco, saw how very connected we were when people were on the streets suffering, and we have such a contagious disease going on. I think that everyone saw that how connected we were.
I was going to say, it showed that work can be done and this can be provided. If people open up their hand, either people chose to help or they went and started printing more money. But the thing is, it was possible all along. And so because of accountability, because we've seen a little bit, we'll go ahead and continue that.
Let's say if they open their hand, and also if there's enough political will. So there is enough urgency or enough lawsuits coming down that we get it done that our city government was not willing to do until they saw this sort of crisis, until they had the shame of seeing the number of encampments on the street increasing from 90 to 300 overnight. We had the political will to get to house most of those people, or to create some kind of safer shelter.
I was going to say COVID got our neighbor, UC Hastings, which basically is right within our border. And that's the lawsuit Ann was talking about that started giving people a house.
I just remembered, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, a couple of points. One was that there's been a need for public restrooms because we're human beings. And so we got those started. And also the shelter in place. All of a sudden, we were able to house all of these unhoused people and give them a dignified, I ended up working as well in a shelter in place hotel. And I witnessed people being housed and treated with dignity and how their lives transformed. So we were able to open up before we couldn't find any of these places. And during the pandemic, I think that let the rest of the city know that it's important to house people. And we somehow found the money and we did it in a quick manner.
Thank you. And how has COVID impacted kind of the overall operations of ABD and Sky Watchers?
So I think that Joelle and Shavonne have covered a lot of how we pivoted, as everybody likes to say around COVID. We pivoted a lot of our operations. We actually ended up doing way more work than we were doing before. So everything came to a standstill, but we sped up. And without going into all of the detail about that, we did like the documentary. We documented life in the containment zone under quarantine. We did the public health posters. We distributed masks and laptops and tried to agitate for Wi-Fi, etc. But what's true is that the pandemic, we already had a pandemic in the Tenderloin. So what the COVID pandemic did was expose, I'm not everybody's saying the same thing, but expose the health inequities that were already there. One of the great things that happened in our life, or ours being the life of Sky Watchers, is that Sam Dennison here at Faithful Fools was in partnership already with folks at UCSF and convened a weekly call with a whole group of physicians, clinicians, researchers, staff members, professors, and medical students at UCSF, along with organizational leaders in the Tenderloin and residents of the Tenderloin, to talk about how they could mitigate the effects of the COVID pandemic. I entered that conversation, about 6 months into it, and have remained ever since. And with my entry, there was already a lot of activity being done and people trying to deliver healthcare sort of more to the people. My concern was less about COVID per se, but about access to treatment in general, about stigma, about medical racism and trauma, and generally about the people that I knew and loved were, I felt like I was watching people my age die, and I wanted to know what people were going to do about it. In one of those conversations, somebody suggested that we do a community grand rounds, which would flip the table from the traditional grand rounds where a prominent physician gets up and teaches younger physicians or students about a new technique in medicine or about a special case, and it brings community experts such as Shavonne and Joelle and other people to the table to tell their stories of all those things, medical racism, trauma, neglect, lack of access, etc., and use their stories as a teaching tool. So that's a project that has gotten really a lot of legs. We've got a couple of archives of stories now, and also a lot of amazing people within the medical establishment who are interested in dismantling the sort of racist roots of medical institutions, who are working with us and archiving their stories also and turning it into what we have now is 4 teaching modules and more in the works.
Thank you. And staying with you, Anne, for folks who are listening to the show today, how can they support the work of Sky Watchers? We talked about screenings, right? Folks can host screenings. They can make donations. You've got, which of you would like to talk a little bit about your annual homeless person memorial vigil coming up as well. So how can folks support you?
So how can the community get engaged, you ask? Like all small nonprofits, we struggle to raise money, but you can reach out to us. You can find us at abdproductions.org, and you can donate there. You can reach out to us and find out how to volunteer and our performances and events that we'll be involved in.
Okay. So, Anne, could you please share with the audience one of your favorite stories?
Well, okay, except that mine's a little unorthodox. It's not really a story, but I wanted to forward the name of Melanie DeMoore, who was there at the very first Sky Watcher gathering before I had any idea what it was going to be. And I said, I don't know what's going to happen, Mel. She said, well, she's a vocal activist. She is an extraordinary singer. She's one of the founding members of Linda Tillery's Cultural Heritage Choir. She's a choral director, composer, etc. And she said, no worries. My favorite thing to do now is a spontaneous choir. So give me a gathering and we'll turn them into a choir. And that's what she did at our first gathering. And she does now every year and sometimes many times a year. She helped us do our very first processional around the Tenderloin, where we walk, as Shavonne was talking about, where we walk through the streets of the Tenderloin singing. And I just needed to sort of give some props to her as also one of the founding members, and just to call out the names, because when I was given the question of favorite stories, I just wanted to mention Janice Detroit, who gave us the name of Sky Watchers because she was the first person I interviewed, and Warren Chapman, one of the first people I met at the Senator, and used to sit and watch TV before those gatherings turned into actual conversations. Warren Chapman, Renan Mariano, Dino Smith, Alexis Alexander, Jerry Tubis, Brother Earl have all passed, and who contributed so much heart and so much soul and so much richness to this work.
Wonderful. And Shavonne, favorite story?
There's so many. The one that comes to mind right now is we have a blind, gay, talented artist who creates puppets. And so one was a dog and another one was a woman. And he passed these puppets off to another member who's good at just being funny. And so Dennis and Gigi got together. Gigi is good at making sounds. So they turned one puppet into Lady Lulu and then the dog puppet into McGruff. And it's just the chemistry of people who come from very different backgrounds. You know, you have gay, transgendered, straight, and different talents and different abilities coming together and making this just music and magic.
Wonderful. And Joelle, favorite story you'd like to share with the audience?
It was actually after the first show, I think 2019, the first time I got on stage with Sky Watchers. And I remember we're doing a 3 show series, and this lady case manager actually works in my building, actually ended up being in the audience. And I remember someone was banging on the door and ringing the bell, and I'm stumbling to the front door, and it's her with like 30 copies of like pictures from the show and talking about how she was in tears the whole show, just hearing her story being told.
Wonderful. I'd like to thank Shavonne, Joelle, and Ann for sharing their wonderful work in the creation and production of Sky Watchers Ensemble Productions. We'll make sure that listeners have your contact information, website, and social media, along with links to donate to the production of the annual Homeless Person Memorial Vigil, as well as the ongoing operations of the ABD and Sky Watchers Ensemble. And to hopefully reach out and set up screening of the documentaries. Please stay safe and healthy out there as we all work our way through this latest stage of COVID-19 pandemic and all of its variants. Thanks very much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
That's it for this episode of Voices of the Community. You've been listening to the voices of the founder of ABD Productions and the Sky Watchers program, Ann Blutenthal, along with members of the Sky Watcher Ensemble, Shavonne Allen and Joelle Yates. To find out more about Sky Watchers Ensemble, annual Homeless Person Memorial Vigil, watch the trailer and set up a screening of the 10th anniversary documentary film, and make a donation along with volunteering, please go to abdproductions.org. We hope that you enjoyed the insights, points of view, and personal stories from the voices of changemakers and their nonprofits and small businesses featured in this series. To find out more and get engaged with the nonprofits, small businesses, and staff members featured in the series, please go to my website, georgecoster.com, and click on Voices of the Community to find links to the extended versions of these interviews and to listen to the entire series. After listening to these stories, we hope that you will consider making a donation and volunteering to provide a hand up to your fellow community members. Today's episode was made possible by the audio wizard and our associate producer, Eric Estrada, and the graphics magic of Casey Nance from Citron Studios, along with the wonderful crew at the San Francisco Public Press and KSFP. Voices of the Community is supported by a grant from the James Irvine Foundation, dedicated to a California where all low-income workers have the power to advance economically. More at irvine.org. Voices of the Community is a member of Intersection for the Arts, which allows us to offer you a tax deduction for your contributions. Please go to georgecoster.com and click on the donate link to make a donation to help us provide future shows just like this one. While you're on our website, you can enjoy our archived past shows, which feature community voices working on solutions to critical issues facing Northern California communities. And you can sign up for our newsletter to find out more about future shows, as well as shows and events from the organizations that are included in our episodes. Take us along on your next COVID walk by subscribing to Voices of the Community on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Google Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at George Coster, and we'd love to hear from you with feedback and show ideas, so send us an email to george@georgecoster.com. I'm George Coster in San Francisco, and thank you for listening.